I literally have, I like to talk a lot, so I keep my slides pretty simple. This is my presentation right here. So we'll probably not stay on this very long. I'll do a quick intro. My name is Matthew Spoke. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a Toronto-based blockchain software company called Nuco. If you are interested in what we're doing, I'm not here to talk about what we're doing. So there's people wearing the same t-shirt as me. We have a booth outside. Come ask us after. I don't want to waste any time on that. So the reason I wanted to come chat with you guys today, and if you're curious, by the way, this is a platypus in our logo. But anyways, different story. The reason I wanted to come talk to you today is kind of along the line of what Alex just mentioned to you. I think I wanted to talk to you about my path to entrepreneurship. I think it's a little bit unique in terms of coming from a relatively unorthodox background to find myself in tech. But I think it's also important for us to understand, coming from Toronto, talking about building the Toronto ecosystem, that the background you come from and the experience you come from should not dictate whether or not you can actually take the leap and go and start a company and become an entrepreneur. And in fact, I think more of us could and should go and try to start companies. And I think that's one of the big things that holds us back as Canadians and as Torontonians when it comes to, measuring up to what other people are doing. So as Alex mentioned, I'm a chartered accountant by training. I studied accounting at the University of Ottawa. I'm Canadian, and I did tax for about 3 years at Deloitte. You could not find a more on-paper, boring resume for somebody to eventually decide to go and start a tech company. And there was a couple of things that led me there. It wasn't a one-time decision on a whim. I woke up one day and decided to drink somebody's Kool-Aid. I had a really great opportunity when I was at Deloitte to work on some really interesting and challenging problems as a chartered accountant, but I always found that I was never really meeting the passions of what I wanted to do. Tax is pretty fascinating stuff if you're a really, really small niche group of people who finds tax really passionate and fascinating stuff. But for everybody else, it's not really. Innovation in tax meant helping a family make use of all their available tax credits. Or, once I got into international corporate tax, it was like, how do you use a Luxembourg corporation to offshore royalty incomes from your IP? Not all that fascinating to an audience like this. Right around the same time, I had been developing this interest for Bitcoin, and my brother introduced it to me in about 2012. I looked at it, I thought it was really, really cool, but I also looked around this ecosystem and realized that I was surrounded by other people who found it interesting at that time. Tended to be gamers and speculators, scammers, money launderers, drug dealers. So this interest of mine didn't really seem to fit in really well with my role as a very conservative chartered accountant at an extremely large global accounting firm. So what do you do? What do you do if you're a tax accountant with this kind of obscure interest? Well, the right answer is you shut up and you keep it to yourself. You don't tell anybody that you're on this high of some weird new technology. But me, and along with a few of my kind of crazy colleagues at the time, one of whom is here tonight, we did the complete opposite. We went straight to the top. We went and we found an opportunity to present to our chief innovation officer, eventually to our CEO, and we were given the amazing opportunity for the following 2 years. I was given the opportunity to build and create kind of a blockchain technology team at Deloitte. And as Alex mentioned, a portion of that time, we were off-site working out of the DMZ, then we went and got our own office. We were kind of encouraged to just go act as if we were a startup. And it was fascinating. 2 years later, fast forward, amazing opportunity. And the great part about going in front of my CEO at the time is that I had this contingency plan. I'd already kind of mentally checked out of Deloitte. I had already applied and been accepted to 2 MBA programs. I knew that accounting had been kind of a thing of the past and I was moving on. So I knew that if my CEO looked at me and said, "You're crazy," I said, "Okay, well, that's fine. I'll go do my MBA." So this contingency kind of drove me and probably made me gutsy enough to go through that process. 2 years later, things are great. But then we started looking around and realizing that we were still pretty constrained by, the typical things you might expect from a big consulting firm. There's bureaucracy, there's budget limitations, and ironically, I'm looking outside the door and looking at startups that existed after us accelerate beyond us with more funding than us, which was crazy to me. I came from this massive organization that literally has presence in 150 countries around the world. So then what do you start thinking about? You're a Canadian accountant who stumbled into a technology role, and I started thinking to myself, well, could I start my own company? I've read tech startup books. I've heard the stories of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, these like sexy, appealing stories. But I also know that about 90% of the founders that go through Y Combinator have technical backgrounds. I'm not an engineer. I also know that although it sounds appealing, there's not all that much sex appeal to building your own company. And I knew more importantly that as an accountant, 8 years of training, it's hard to start a company without any money. So what did I do? I mean, I had the opportunity over those few years to meet investors and other startups. So I started setting up meetings with founders of other companies and investors that I had interacted with in the past. And I started kind of pitching them on my idea. And I was being very well received. So, optimistic about my chances. I then started asking people about investment. I mean, keep in mind at this time, I'm still working at Deloitte. And then the story changed. Nobody was quite willing to take me seriously because I hadn't quite taken that step towards taking myself seriously. And although I had this contingency plan of, well, if I don't find an investment, I can keep my job at Deloitte, I figured that would be enough. But then they asked me something quite different. If you're serious about this, quit your job. There's no investment on the table. There's no money waiting for you. Quit your job. And this is the moment when you look at yourself, you slap yourself in the face, you say, snap out of it. I remember that day at home, sitting in front of my computer, writing my resignation emails and looking physically anxious before I clicked send. And my roommate, Courtney, at the time said, Matt, you look sick. And then I thought about, the great co-founders that I had found for myself and the unbelievable and unlikely success that we had at Deloitte. So I clicked send on the email. And I mean, the rest is history. I won't get into it. But all I wanted to kind of drive home as a point is I'm the picture of why you should start a company. I'm the picture of like the most unorthodox background, somebody who goes into something completely out of the ordinary and does it. And I mean, there's still a long way to go. I'm not saying if you quit your job, it's going to be green pastures on the other side, because it's absolutely not. I mean, we've raised money, we've hired some people, we're still progressing and growing. But if I can do it, you can do it. Short story. Anyways, that's all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you so much. I have 2 minutes to take 1 or 2 questions. Anybody have a question? Yeah.
Great presentation. Hi, Matt. I was wondering, why did you choose the platypus as the logo of Nuco?
Well, there's 2 answers. One would involve me telling my favorite platypus joke where I have a lisp in my voice, but I won't go through that. It's too long for the time I have left. There's no real reason other than the fact that we thought it was kind of a cool, innovative animal, half, mammal, lays eggs, poisonous claws when it's mating. So we seem friendly, but, watch out. One more question? Yeah.
Hey Matt, how did you approach the founders that you spoke to? Like, what did you say to them?
The who?
The founders of the other companies, like when you were looking.
Well, I mean, a lot of them are companies that we'd interacted with and worked with. I mean, one of our mandates when we were at Deloitte was to kind of find these startups that we could start working with. So I had started to, again, by osmosis, feel the experience of being in a startup. We were very much challenged at Deloitte to act and think and operate like a startup. But the reality was there was certain things that only startup founders really feel and understand that you can't replicate when you have a safe salary and a path to promotion. So I needed to go and get it like directly from people who lived that mindset on a daily basis. I mean, the freakiest part about leaving this cushy job is exactly that, right? Like, I knew what my path to becoming a partner at Deloitte was. I knew what my salary next year was. I knew that I had a nice condo and I could, potentially kick my roommates out and afford it on my own. You throw all out of the way. So that's what I wanted to learn from the founders. The most kind of telling meetings were the ones I had with investors, where it was like, cool, but you're not serious yet. And actually, the day I resigned was a Wednesday. The day I met my angel investor was 2 days later on a Friday. So things can happen like that. It's not always going to happen like that, but we were very fortunate.
Thanks.
I think that's all the time I have. So thank you very much, guys.